The rope swung from the courthouse, oak like a death sentence waiting to be claimed. And Hannah Wright knew it had her name carved into every twisted fiber. She stood on the wooden boardwalk outside the general store, her worn calico dress catching the dusty New Mexico wind of 1878, watching as the crowd gathered in Hatcheta's town square. Their faces, once familiar and kind, now twisted with suspicion and hatred. 3 days ago, she had been the schoolteacher everyone respected. Now she was the woman they wanted to hang. Murderess, someone hissed as she passed. Hannah kept her chin up, though her hands trembled. She had not killed Mayor Thompson. She had found him, yes, bleeding out in his office with her letter opener buried in his chest. But finding a dead man did not make her his killer, no matter what the evidence suggested. Miss Wright. Sheriff Morrison stepped into her path, his weathered face apologetic but firm. Best you stay inside today. Folks are getting riled up. I have done nothing wrong, Hannah said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. I will not hide like a guilty woman. Then you are a fool. The sheriff tipped his hat and moved on, leaving her alone on the boardwalk. The whispers followed her everywhere. How the mayor had been courting her despite her rejections. How she had been seen arguing with him the day before his death. How her letter opener, the one with her initials engraved on the handle, had been the weapon. How she had been the only one in the building when the body was discovered. It all looked damning. Hannah knew that. But she also knew the truth, and the truth was that someone had very carefully framed her for murder. She walked toward the boarding house where she rented a small room, her boots echoing on the wooden planks. Mrs. Henderson, her landlady, blocked the door. I cannot have a killer staying under my roof, the older woman said, her mouth set in a hard line. You have until sundown to collect your things. Mrs. Henderson, please. You have known me for 2 years. You know I could never. I know what everyone knows. The mayor is dead and all signs point to you. Mrs. Henderson crossed her arms. I have my reputation to think about. Hannah felt the walls closing in. No home. No job. The school board had dismissed her immediately. No friends willing to speak on her behalf. The whole town had turned against her in the span of 72 hours. She gathered her meager belongings into a carpet bag, her hands shaking as she folded the few dresses she owned. Her mother's Bible, a photograph of her parents, dead these 5 years, a silver locket. Everything she owned in the world fit into one small bag. Where would she go? The next town was 40 miles away, and she had no horse, no money for the stage. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, unforgiving and deadly. As she stepped out of the boarding house for the last time, a commotion drew her attention. A rider was coming into town, his horse kicking up dust on the main road. The man sat tall in the saddle, his black hat pulled low against the sun. Even from a distance, Hannah could see he was a stranger. The horse was a magnificent chestnut mare, well cared for and strong. The rider himself was broad-shouldered, wearing a dark vest over a dusty white shirt, a bandana tied loosely around his neck. A gun belt sat on his hips, the holster worn but well-maintained. He stopped in front of the saloon, dismounting with easy grace. Several townspeople stopped to stare. Strangers always drew attention in Hatcheta, but there was something about this man that commanded it. Hannah looked away, focusing on her own dire circumstances. She had no interest in cowboys passing through town. She needed to find shelter before nightfall, and options were running dangerously thin. She walked toward the edge of town, where a few abandoned shacks stood near the old mining claim. They were barely standing, but at least they had roofs. It was better than sleeping in the desert. You are Hannah Wright. The voice came from behind her, deep and measured. Hannah turned to find the stranger standing a few feet away. Up close, she could see his face clearly. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 26 or 27. His jaw was strong, shadowed with a few days' growth of dark beard. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a striking gray that seemed to see right through her. "I am," she said warily. "And you are Asher Nolan." He tipped his hat slightly. "I heard about your trouble." "Then you heard wrong," Hannah said sharply. "I am innocent. I know." Those two words, spoken with such casual certainty, hit Hannah like a physical blow. She stared at him, searching his face for mockery or deception. She found neither. "You do not even know me," she whispered. "Do not need to." Asher nodded toward the abandoned shack. "You planning to stay there? I have no other choice. The whole town believes I killed Mayor Thompson. But you did not. It was not a question." Hannah felt something crack in her chest, some wall she had built to keep herself together over these terrible 3 days. "No," she said, her voice breaking. "I did not. But no one believes me. I do," those words again. Hannah blinked back sudden tears. "Why, everyone else has condemned me." Asher was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes studying her face. "I have spent enough time around liars and killers to know the look of one. You do not have it." He glanced at the shack, then back at her. "That place is not fit for a dog, let alone a lady. Come on." "Come where?" "I just rented a room at the saloon. They have got a second one available. I will pay for it." Hannah stepped back, shaking her head. "I cannot accept charity from a stranger." "It is not charity. Consider it an investment." Asher turned and started walking back toward town. "You coming or not?" Hannah hesitated, then hurried after him. "An investment in what? In finding out who really killed the mayor?" Asher glanced at her. "Because someone did, and they are letting you take the fall for it. That does not sit right with me." The saloon owner, a portly man named Gus, was less than pleased to rent a room to Hannah. "Folks will not like it," he muttered, counting the coins Asher placed on the bar. "Folks can mind their own business," Asher said calmly. "The lady needs a room, you have got one. Simple as that." Gus grumbled but handed over a key. "Upstairs, second door on the right, but if there is trouble—" "There will not be," Asher assured him. The room was small and sparse, but it was clean and secure. Hannah set her carpet bag on the narrow bed and turned to face Asher, who stood in the doorway. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." Asher leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed. "My mother was falsely accused of theft when I was a boy. The whole town turned on her just like this. She was innocent, but no one would listen. No one stood up for her." His jaw tightened. "She died still carrying that shame, even after the real thief confessed years later." "I am sorry," Hannah said softly. "So am I." Asher straightened. "But I can do for you what no one did for her. I can find the truth." "You are a lawman." "Not exactly. I track people for a living. Bounty hunter mostly, though I have done some detective work." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "Got a telegram yesterday about a man I have been chasing. Trail led me here to Hachita. Heard about your situation when I rode in." Hannah sank onto the bed, suddenly exhausted. "I do not understand any of this. Who would want to frame me for murder? I am just a schoolteacher. I have no enemies." "Everyone has enemies. They just do not always know it." Asher moved into the room, closing the door behind him. "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning." So Hannah did. She told him about Mayor Thompson's unwanted advances, how he had cornered her after a town council meeting 6 weeks ago and professed his feelings. She had rejected him as gently as possible, but he had not taken it well. "He was married," Hannah said. "I would never have encouraged him, even if I had felt anything for him, which I did not. But he became persistent, sending flowers, writing letters, showing up at the schoolhouse." "Anyone else know about this?" Asher asked. His wife knew. "Martha Thompson. She came to see me 2 weeks ago, told me to stay away from her husband. Hannah twisted her hands in her lap. I tried to explain that I wanted nothing to do with him, but she would not listen. She was so angry. Angry enough to kill him and frame you. Hannah looked up sharply. You think Martha could have done this? Someone did. And the wife of a philandering husband is always a good place to start. Asher pulled a chair over and sat down, his expression serious. What about the letter opener, the one used to kill him? It was mine. A gift from the school board when I was hired. I kept it on my desk at the schoolhouse. Hannah frowned, but I had not seen it in weeks. I thought I had misplaced it. So someone could have taken it any time. Yes, I suppose so. The schoolhouse is not locked during the day. Children and parents come and go. Asher nodded slowly, processing the information. Tell me about the day you found the body. Hannah closed her eyes, the memory still fresh and horrible. It was late afternoon. School had let out an hour before. I was walking past the courthouse when I heard a noise inside, like something falling. The door was ajar, so I went in to check. I found the mayor in his office on the floor. There was so much blood. Her voice shook. I tried to help him to stop the bleeding, but he was already gone. That is when I saw the letter opener. I pulled it out, thinking foolishly that I could help, and that is when Sheriff Morrison walked in. So you were found holding the murder weapon, covered in the victim's blood. Yes. And no one else was seen entering or leaving the building. Not that I know of, but I was not paying attention before I went inside. I was thinking about lesson plans for the next day. Asher stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street below. The sun was setting, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and red. Someone knew you would be walking past at that time, someone who knew your routine. Everyone in town knows my routine, Hannah said. I walk the same path every day from the schoolhouse to the boarding house. Then we need to figure out who had the most to gain from the mayor's death. Asher turned back to her. Besides his wife, who else might have wanted him dead? Hannah thought for a moment. The mayor was not well liked. He raised taxes last year, which made a lot of people angry. There were rumors of corruption, that he was taking bribes from the railroad company. Railroad company? They want to run a line through Hatchita. The mayor was in charge of negotiating the land rights. Some people thought he was lining his own pockets. Asher's eyes sharpened with interest. That is motive. Who was most vocal about the corruption? Daniel Foster. He owns the feed store. He confronted the mayor at a town meeting last month, accused him of selling out the town. Hannah paused. They almost came to blows. The sheriff had to separate them. Anyone else? Thomas Wright. No relation to me, though people sometimes assume. He owns the land the railroad wants most. He was refusing to sell, said the mayor was pressuring him. Asher paced the small room, his mind clearly working through the possibilities. So we have got a jealous wife, an angry merchant, and a landowner being pressured to sell. Any one of them could have done it. But why frame me? Hannah asked. What did I do to deserve this? You were convenient. A woman who had publicly rejected the mayor, who had a clear motive in the eyes of the town. Someone saw an opportunity and took it. Asher stopped pacing and looked at her directly. But we are going to prove your innocence. I promise you that. The certainty in his voice made Hannah want to believe him, but she had learned over the past 3 days that hope was a dangerous thing. The sheriff is not investigating, she said quietly. He has already decided I am guilty. No trial, no proper investigation. They are just waiting for the circuit judge to come through next month. A month in jail. The sheriff has not arrested me yet. He says he is giving me the benefit of the doubt, but really, I think he just does not want to deal with the paperwork. Hannah laughed bitterly. So instead, I am trapped in this town, waiting for judgment. Then we have got a month to find the real killer. Asher moved toward the door. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start asking questions. Asher, Hannah stopped him before he could leave. Thank you for believing me, for helping me. He looked back at her and something in his expression softened. You are innocent. Someone needs to stand up for that. After he left, Hannah lay on the narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in 3 days, she felt a small flicker of hope. Asher Nolan was a stranger, but he was the only person in this entire town who believed her. That had to count for something. The next morning, Hannah woke to sunlight streaming through the thin curtains. She dressed quickly in her least worn dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. When she came downstairs, Asher was already at a table in the corner of the saloon, eating breakfast. Sit, he said, pushing a plate toward her. You need to eat. Hannah realized she had barely eaten since finding the mayor's body. The food smelled wonderful, fresh biscuits and bacon and eggs. She sat and ate while Asher outlined his plan. We start with the wife, he said. Martha Thompson. I want to see her reaction when she meets you face to face. She hates me, Hannah said. She thinks I was having an affair with her husband. Good. Hatred makes people careless. Asher finished his coffee. We will pay her a visit this morning. The Thompson house was one of the largest in Hatcheta, a 2-story structure with a wraparound porch and a well-tended garden. Martha Thompson was a handsome woman in her mid-40s, her dark hair streaked with gray, her face lined with grief and anger. She opened the door to find Hannah and Asher on her porch, and her expression immediately hardened. How dare you show your face here, she hissed at Hannah. You killed my husband. I did not, Hannah said firmly, and I am here to prove it, Mrs. Thompson, Asher said smoothly. My name is Asher Nolan. I am investigating your husband's death. I would like to ask you a few questions. The sheriff already questioned me. I have nothing more to say. Martha started to close the door, but Asher put his hand against it. Were you aware that your husband was receiving threats? He asked. Martha froze. What threats? From the railroad company, from landowners, from half the town, it seems. Asher's tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp. Your husband made a lot of enemies, Mrs. Thompson. My husband was a good man trying to do what was best for this town, Martha said, but her voice wavered. Was he? Hannah asked quietly. Or was he taking bribes? Martha's face flushed with anger. Get out, both of you, get off my property before I call the sheriff. As they walked away from the house, Asher glanced at Hannah. She knows something. Did you see how she reacted when I mentioned threats? She seemed surprised, Hannah said. Or she is a good actress. Asher turned down Main Street. Let us talk to Daniel Foster next. The feed store was busy with customers, but Daniel Foster made time to speak with them in the back room. He was a burly man in his 50s, with work-roughened hands and a direct manner. I will not pretend to be sorry Thompson is dead, Foster said bluntly. Man was a crook and a liar. But I did not kill him, if that is what you are asking. Where were you the afternoon he died? Asher asked. Right here working. Had half a dozen customers who can vouch for me. Foster crossed his arms. Look, I wanted Thompson out of office, not dead. I was planning to run against him in the next election. The letter opener that killed him belonged to Miss Wright, Asher said, watching Foster's face carefully. You ever been to the schoolhouse? Sure, I've got 3 kids who go there. Why? The letter opener went missing a few weeks before the murder. Anyone could have taken it. Foster's eyes narrowed. You think I stole it to frame her? I have got no quarrel with Miss Wright. She is a fine teacher. My daughter loves her. They left the feed store with no more answers than they had arrived with. Thomas Wright, the landowner, was equally unhelpful. He had been out inspecting his property the afternoon of the murder, alone, with no one to verify his whereabouts. This is impossible, Hannah said as they walked back to the saloon in the fading afternoon light. Everyone has a motive, but no one has proof. Someone is lying, Asher said. We just need to figure out who. Over the next week, they interviewed everyone who had contact with the mayor in the days before his death. The sheriff was uncooperative, insisting that the case was closed and Hannah was guilty. The town continued to treat Hannah like a pariah, crossing the street to avoid her, whispering behind their hands. But Asher never left her side. He walked with her through town, his presence a silent protection against the hostility of the crowd. He bought her meals, made sure she had everything she needed. And slowly, Hannah began to see him as more than just her defender. He was intelligent and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that emerged at unexpected moments. He told her stories of his years tracking outlaws across the territories, of narrow escapes and hard-won victories. He asked about her life, her dreams, why she had become a teacher. "My mother was a teacher," Hannah told him one evening as they sat in the saloon. The place was nearly empty, just a few drifters playing cards in the corner. "She taught me to read when I was 4 years old. Books were magic to me, doorways to other worlds. I wanted to give that to other children." "You are good at it," Asher said. "I talked to some of the parents. The ones who would still speak to me anyway. They all said their children learned more from you in 1 year than they had in 3 years before." Hannah felt warmth spread through her chest at the praise. "Thank you. Teaching is the only thing I have ever wanted to do. And now they have taken it from me." "We will get it back," Asher promised. "Your reputation, your job, everything. I will not stop until we do." Hannah looked at him across the table, this man who had appeared in her life like some kind of guardian angel. He had no reason to help her, no obligation to care. But he did, and that meant more to her than she could express. "Why are you still here?" she asked softly. "You said you were tracking someone. You could have moved on days ago." Asher was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes holding hers. "Maybe I found a better reason to stay." The air between them shifted, charged with something Hannah had not felt in years. She had been so focused on her work, on building a life in Hatchita, that she had never made room for romance. But now, sitting across from Asher Nolan, she felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. "I should go to bed," she said, standing abruptly. "Thank you for dinner." She hurried upstairs before he could respond, her heart pounding. This was foolish. She could not afford to have feelings for Asher, not when her entire life was falling apart. But as she lay in bed that night, she could not stop thinking about the way he had looked at her, the promise in his words. The next morning brought a breakthrough. Asher came to her room early, excitement clear on his face. "I found something," he said. "Get dressed. We need to go to the courthouse." The courthouse was locked, but Asher picked the lock with practiced ease. Inside, the building still smelled faintly of blood and death. Hannah shuddered as they passed the door to the mayor's office. "What are we looking for?" she asked. "Financial records. If Thompson was taking bribes, there will be proof." Asher pulled open filing cabinets, rifling through papers. "Help me look. Anything related to the railroad deal." They searched for an hour before Hannah found it. A ledger book hidden in the back of a drawer, filled with columns of numbers and notes in the mayor's handwriting. "Asher, look at this." He came to her side, scanning the pages quickly. His expression grew darker with each entry he read. "Thompson was not just taking bribes," he said. "He was extorting people, threatening to block the railroad deal unless they paid him off." "Who?" Hannah asked. Asher pointed to a series of entries. "Daniel Foster paid him $200, Thomas Wright paid $300, and look at this." He turned to the last page. "Martha Thompson knew. There is a note here about moving money into her name to hide it from investigators." Hannah felt her stomach drop. So Martha knew her husband was corrupt. She knew he was destroying lives for money. And when his activities were about to be exposed, she killed him and framed you." Asher closed the ledger. "She gets to play the grieving widow, inherit his money, and no one looks twice at her. We need to show this to the sheriff." "No." Asher held up a hand. "Not yet. Morrison is incompetent at best, corrupt at worst. If we show him this, Martha might get wind of it and disappear. We need a confession." "How do we get that?" Asher smiled, but there was no humor in it. "We set a trap." That evening, they sent word to Martha Thompson that they had found evidence that would exonerate Hannah and reveal the true killer. They invited her to meet them at the courthouse at sunset, claiming they wanted to give her a chance to see the evidence before they took it to the sheriff. Martha came, her face composed but her eyes wary. She met them in the courthouse lobby, glancing around nervously. "What is this about?" she demanded. "I do not have time for games." "No games, Mrs. Thompson," Asher said. He held up the ledger. "Just the truth." Martha's face went white. "Where did you get that?" "Where your husband hid it, along with records of every bribe, every threat, every illegal deal he made." Asher opened the book, "Including notes about how you helped him hide the money." "That does not prove anything," Martha said, but her voice shook. "It proves your husband was a criminal. It proves you knew about it." Hannah stepped forward. "It proves you had every reason to want him dead before his crimes were exposed." "I did not kill him." But Martha's eyes darted to the door, calculating escape routes. "Yes, you did." Asher's voice was hard. "You killed him with Hannah's letter opener, which you stole from the schoolhouse weeks earlier. You knew Hannah's routine. You killed your husband, left the body, and waited for Hannah to find it. Then you made sure the sheriff knew about Thompson's interest in her, gave him a motive to believe she was guilty." "You cannot prove any of that," Martha said desperately. "Actually, we can." Sheriff Morrison stepped out from the mayor's office, where he had been listening. Behind him were two deputies. "We found the dress, Mrs. Thompson, the one you wore when you killed your husband. You hid it in the cellar, but you did not clean it well enough. There is blood on it, your husband's blood." Martha's composure shattered. She lunged for the door, but the deputies caught her. She struggled, screaming as they pulled her arms behind her back. "He was going to ruin us," she cried. "The railroad company found out about the bribes. They were going to expose him, take back all the money. We would have been destitute, humiliated. I had no choice." "You had a choice," Hannah said quietly. "You could have told the truth. Instead, you chose to kill him and destroy my life." "You," Martha laughed bitterly. "You were nothing. No family, no connections, the perfect scapegoat. No one would have cared if you hanged." "I care," Asher said, his voice cold. "And now you will hang instead." As the deputies led Martha away, still screaming and struggling, Hannah felt her legs give out. Asher caught her, his arms strong and steady around her. "It is over," he murmured. "You are free." Hannah buried her face in his chest and wept, great shuddering sobs of relief and grief and overwhelming emotion. Asher held her through it all, his hand gentle on her hair, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. When she finally pulled back, wiping her eyes, Sheriff Morrison approached with an apologetic expression. "Miss Wright, I owe you an apology. I should have investigated more thoroughly. I let public opinion cloud my judgment." "Yes, you did," Hannah said, her voice still shaky but firm. "You nearly let an innocent woman hang because you were too lazy to do your job properly." Morrison flushed but nodded. "You are right. For what it is worth, I am sorry." "Your apology means nothing to me, Sheriff. But perhaps you will think twice before condemning someone without evidence in the future." Hannah turned away from him, toward Asher. "Take me back to the saloon, please." They walked through the darkening streets, past townspeople who stared and whispered. News traveled fast in Hatchita. By morning, everyone would know the truth. Back in her room at the saloon, Hannah sank onto the bed, exhausted. Asher lingered in the doorway as he had that first night. "You should rest," he said. "Stay," Hannah said impulsively. "Please, I do not want to be alone right now." Asher closed the door and pulled the chair over to sit beside the bed. In the dim lamplight, his face was all sharp angles and shadows. "You were right," Hannah said. "About everything. You found the truth when no one else cared to look." "We found it together," Asher corrected. "You never gave up. Even when the whole town turned against you, you kept fighting, only because you gave me hope." Hannah reached out and took his hand. His skin was warm and rough, calloused from years of hard work. "I do not know what I would have done without you." Asher's fingers tightened around hers. "You would have survived. You are stronger than you know, maybe, but I am glad I did not have to find out." Hannah looked up at him, her heart in her throat. "What happens now? Will you leave? Go back to tracking outlaws?" "I have been thinking about that," Asher said slowly. "The man I was tracking, the one who brought me to Hatchita, I got word yesterday that he was caught in Arizona. Someone else claimed the bounty." "Oh, I am sorry. I am not." Asher turned her hand over, tracing the lines of her palm with his thumb. "Because it means I am free to stay if I wanted to." Hannah's breath caught. "Do you want to?" "Yes." The word was simple, but the intensity in his gray eyes made it a declaration. "Hannah, I came to this town by chance, but staying was a choice. Helping you was a choice. And somewhere along the way I made another choice without even realizing it." "What choice?" "To fall in love with you." The room seemed to shrink, the air thick with the weight of his confession. Hannah felt tears prick her eyes again, but these were different from before. These were tears of joy, of relief, of hope finally fulfilled. "I love you too," she whispered. "I did not want to. I thought it was foolish to develop feelings when everything was falling apart, but I could not help it." Asher stood and pulled her to her feet, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," Hannah breathed. His lips met hers, soft at first, then deepening as she melted against him. It was nothing like the clumsy kisses of her youth. This was a kiss of promise, of passion, of two souls finding each other in the darkness. Hannah wrapped her arms around his neck, losing herself in the taste and feel of him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Asher rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this properly," he said. "Court you the right way, give you time to heal from everything that has happened." "How much time?" Hannah asked, a smile playing at her lips. "However long you need." Asher stepped back, though he kept hold of her hands. "But know that I am not going anywhere. I am staying in Hatchita with you." "What will you do? For work, I mean." "I was thinking about opening a detective agency. Seems like this town could use someone who actually investigates crimes properly." Asher grinned. "Besides, Morrison offered me a job as a deputy." "Did you accept?" "Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Make sure you were all right with me staying." Hannah laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "Asher Nolan, I am more than all right with it. I am overjoyed." Over the following weeks, Hatchita slowly began to accept that they had been wrong about Hannah. The school board offered her job back with a formal apology. Mrs. Henderson begged her to return to the boarding house, but Hannah politely declined. She had found a small cottage on the edge of town to rent, with a garden and a view of the desert. Asher took the job as deputy sheriff and proved to be invaluable. He trained the other deputies in proper investigative techniques and helped solve several cases that had been languishing unsolved. The town quickly learned that Deputy Nolan was not a man to be trifled with, but it was not all work. True to his word, Asher courted Hannah properly. He took her on long rides into the desert, where they would watch the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. He brought her flowers from the wilderness, hardy blooms that survived in the harsh climate. He sat in the back of her classroom sometimes, watching her teach, his face soft with admiration. They attended church socials together, took walks through town, shared quiet dinners at the saloon. The townspeople, guilty over their treatment of Hannah, went out of their way to be kind to her now. She accepted their belated friendship with grace, though she never quite forgot how quickly they had turned on her. 3 months after Martha Thompson was hanged for murder, Asher came to Hannah's cottage with a small box in his pocket. It was a Sunday evening, and they were sitting on her porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Hannah," Asher said, taking her hand, "I have something I want to ask you." She turned to him, her heart already knowing what was coming. "Yes." He slid off the porch bench and knelt on one knee, pulling out the box. Inside was a simple gold band with a small diamond, nothing fancy but beautiful in its simplicity. "I know we have not known each other long," Asher said, "but in the months since I met you, I have come to realize that you are the finest person I have ever known. You are brave and kind and intelligent. You faced down a whole town with your head held high. You never stopped believing in the truth, even when the lie would have been easier." He opened the box. "Hannah Wright, will you marry me?" "Yes," Hannah said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms. They kissed under the New Mexico stars, two people who had found each other in the darkest of circumstances and chosen to build something beautiful together. They were married 6 weeks later in the Hachita church, with the whole town in attendance. Sheriff Morrison walked Hannah down the aisle, his way of trying to make amends. Hannah wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair. Asher wore his best suit, his dark hair combed back, his gray eyes shining as she approached. The ceremony was short and sweet. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Asher kissed her with such tenderness that several of the women in the congregation wept. The reception was held in the town square, with food and music and dancing late into the night. "I never thought I would be this happy," Hannah told Asher as they danced under strings of lanterns. "After everything that happened, I thought my life was over, but you gave me a new beginning." "We gave each other a new beginning," Asher corrected. "I was just drifting before I met you. No home, no purpose beyond the next bounty, but you made me want to settle down to build a life." They moved into Hannah's cottage, which was just big enough for the two of them. Asher added on a room that he used as an office, where he kept files on his investigations. Hannah continued to teach, loving her work more than ever now that she had someone to come home to each day. Their life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Hannah would rise early to prepare for school, and Asher would make coffee and breakfast. They would part ways for the day, Hannah to the schoolhouse and Asher to the sheriff's office. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch, talking about their days, making plans for the future. A year into their marriage, Hannah discovered she was pregnant. She told Asher over dinner, nervous about his reaction. They had not talked much about children, both so focused on building their new life together. But Asher's face lit up with joy. He lifted her off the ground and spun her around, laughing. "We are going to have a baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "Hannah, we are going to be parents. Are you happy?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "Happy, I am over the moon." He set her down gently, his hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach. "A little boy or girl? Part of you and part of me." "I hope they have your courage," Hannah said. "And your kindness," Asher replied. Hannah continued teaching until her 6th month, when the school board gently suggested she take leave. She spent her days preparing for the baby, sewing tiny clothes, arranging the spare bedroom into a nursery. Asher was almost comically overprotective, insisting she rest constantly, fetching anything she needed before she could even ask. In the spring of 1880, Hannah gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas, after Hannah's father. He had Asher's gray eyes and Hannah's dark hair, and from the moment he entered the world, he owned both their hearts completely. Asher proved to be a devoted father. He would walk the floor with Thomas when the baby fussed at night, singing old cowboy songs in his deep voice. He fashioned a cradle with his own hands, carved with intricate designs. As Thomas grew, Asher was endlessly patient, teaching him to walk, to ride, to be a good man. Hannah watched her husband with their son and fell in love with him all over again. This strong, brave man who had stood by her when no one else would, who had given her back her life and her freedom, was now giving that same devotion to their child. 2 years later, they had a daughter. Sarah arrived during a thunderstorm, her first cries mixing with the sound of rain on the roof. She had Hannah's delicate features and Asher's quiet intensity. Where Thomas was rambunctious and outgoing, Sarah was thoughtful and observant. "We have a good life," Hannah told Asher one evening when the children were asleep. They were sitting on the porch as they had done countless times, watching the desert stars. "Sometimes I think about what might have happened if you had not come to Hatchita." "Do not think about that," Asher said, pulling her close. "I did come, and everything worked out the way it was supposed to, because you believed me. You stood by me when the whole town wanted me dead." "I will always stand by you," Asher promised. "That is what love means. Believing in each other, even when no one else does." As the years passed, Asher built a reputation as one of the finest lawmen in New Mexico. He eventually became sheriff when Morrison retired, a position he held with fairness and integrity. Hannah continued teaching, shaping young minds and instilling in them a love of learning. Thomas grew into a strong, capable young man with his father's sense of justice. At 18, he joined Asher at the sheriff's office, working as a deputy. Sarah, quieter but no less determined, became a teacher like her mother, taking over Hannah's position when she finally retired. Hatchita grew and prospered over the decades. The railroad eventually came through, bringing commerce and new settlers. The town that had once been so quick to condemn, Hannah now celebrated her as one of its most respected citizens. She and Asher were pillars of the community, known for their kindness and wisdom. But through all the changes and growth, their love remained constant. Asher still brought Hannah flowers from the desert. She still waited for him on the porch at the end of each day. They still sat together under the stars, holding hands, grateful for the life they had built together. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the town threw them a celebration in the square. Hundreds of people came, including former students of Hannah's and criminals Asher had brought to justice who had since reformed. There were speeches and toasts, laughter and music. As the sun set and the lanterns were lit, Asher led Hannah to the center of the square for a dance. The crowd fell silent, watching as the couple moved together with the ease of long practice. "You remember the first time we danced," Asher murmured, "at our wedding." "I remember every moment with you," Hannah replied. "From the day you rode into town and said you believed me, you saved my life, Asher." "And you saved mine," he said. "I was lost before I found you, but you gave me a home, a family, a purpose. Everything I am because of you." They kissed there in the middle of the square, surrounded by the town that had once condemned Hannah and now loved her. It was a testament to the power of truth, of standing firm in the face of injustice, of believing in each other even when the world says no. As they grew older, their children gave them grandchildren. Thomas married a rancher's daughter and had 3 sons. Sarah married a doctor who moved to Hatchita and had twin girls. The cottage on the edge of town was always full of laughter and life. Grandchildren running through the garden, climbing into Grandpa Asher's lap to hear stories of the Old West. Hannah's hair turned silver, and Asher's face lined with age, but their love never dimmed. They still took walks through town, slower now but no less sweet. They still sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the desert sky turn colors, their weathered hands intertwined. "I have been thinking," Asher said one evening when they were both in their 70s. "About everything that happened, about Martha Thompson and the trial." "That was a lifetime ago," Hannah said. "I know, but I have been thinking about how close we came to never having this." He gestured at their life, the cottage, the garden where their grandchildren played. "If I had ridden through Hatchita one day earlier or one day later, I would have missed you. We would never have met." "But you did not miss me," Hannah said firmly. "You came exactly when you were supposed to. I have to believe that. I have to believe we were meant to find each other." "So do I." Asher lifted her hand and kissed it. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Hannah Nolan. These 50 years with you have been the greatest gift of my life." "Only 50, Hannah teased. "We have been married 27 years. "I know, but I count from the day I met you." "The day I decided to believe you when no one else would," Asher smiled. "That was the day my real life began." Hannah felt tears slip down her cheeks. Even after all these years, Asher could still move her to tears with his words. "I love you," she whispered. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Asher said. "Always have. Always will." They sat together as the stars emerged, one by one, in the vast New Mexico sky. The desert wind whispered through the sage, carrying the scent of wildflowers and dust. From inside the house came the sounds of their family, their legacy, the life they had built from the ashes of false accusations and mob justice. Hannah thought back to that terrible time when the town had turned against her, when she had stood alone and afraid with a noose waiting in the square. She thought about Asher riding into town, a stranger with no reason to care, who had looked at her and said those two words that changed everything. "I believe you," belief, faith, trust. Those were the foundations they had built their life on. Not just Asher's belief in Hannah's innocence, but their belief in each other, in the strength of their love, in the possibility of redemption and second chances. The town of Hatchita had learned a hard lesson the day Martha Thompson was revealed as a murderer. They learned not to rush to judgment, not to condemn without evidence, not to let fear and suspicion overcome reason and compassion. It was a lesson they passed down through generations, a cautionary tale about the danger of mob mentality. But for Hannah and Asher, it was so much more. It was the story of how they found each other, how one man's courage and one woman's resilience forged a love that would last a lifetime. As the years continued to pass, they watched their grandchildren grow and have children of their own. The cottage that had once been so quiet now rang with the voices of great-grandchildren. Thomas took over as sheriff when Asher finally retired at 75. Sarah's daughter became a teacher, carrying on the family tradition. The town of Hatchita continued to thrive. New buildings replaced old ones. Roads were paved. Electricity came, and then telephones. The Wild West of their youth faded into memory, replaced by a more modern world. But some things remained constant. The desert still stretched endlessly in all directions. The sky still blazed with stars at night. And in the small cottage on the edge of town, love still flourished. Asher passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, Hannah's hand in his. His last words were her name, spoken with the same tenderness he had shown her from their first meeting. The town mourned the loss of a great man, a lawman who had brought justice and fairness to Hatchita. But Hannah knew the world had lost even more than that. It had lost a man who understood that standing up for the truth, even when it was unpopular, was the highest calling. A man who saw an innocent woman in distress and chose to help, asking nothing in return. A man whose love had been unwavering, constant, and true for over 50 years. Hannah lived another 5 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She spent her days in the garden Asher had tended for her, teaching her youngest great-grandchildren to read, telling stories of the old days when the West was still wild and justice was hard-won. When she joined Asher at last, the whole town came to her funeral. They buried her beside him in the Hachita cemetery, under the shade of a cottonwood tree. The headstone read, Hannah Wright Nolan, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, teacher. She stood for truth. And next to it, Asher's stone. Asher Nolan, beloved husband, father, grandfather, lawman. He stood for justice. But perhaps the most fitting tribute came not from the stones or the flowers or the tears shed at their passing. It came from the generations that followed, who told their story to their children and their children's children. The story of how one man believed when no one else did, and how that belief sparked a love that changed not just 2 lives, but an entire community. In Hachita, they still tell the story of Hannah Wright and Asher Nolan. They tell it to remind people about the importance of truth, about the danger of rushing to judgment, about the power of standing up for what is right even when the whole world stands against you. But mostly, they tell it because it is a beautiful love story. A story of 2 souls finding each other in the darkest of times, choosing each other despite impossible odds, and building a life of joy and meaning together. It is a story that reminds us that love is not just about passion or romance, though Hannah and Asher had both in abundance. Love is about belief. It is about saying, I trust you when the evidence says otherwise. It is about standing beside someone when it would be easier to walk away. It is about fighting for the truth even when lies are more convenient. The town had turned against Hannah, ready to condemn her for a crime she did not commit. But Asher had said those 4 simple words, I believe you. And in doing so, he had not just saved her life. He had given her a future, a family, a love that would span decades and touch countless lives. That is the legacy of Hannah Wright and Asher Nolan. Not just the children they raised or the cases they solved or the students they taught. Their legacy is the reminder that one person's faith can change everything. That standing up for truth and justice matters. That love, real love, is worth fighting for. In the small cottage on the edge of Hachita, where desert wildflowers still bloom in the garden and the porch still faces the setting sun, their story lives on. And on quiet evenings, when the wind whispers through the sage and the stars emerge in the vast New Mexico sky, you can almost hear them. An echo of laughter, the murmur of voices, 2 souls still together, still believing in each other, still in love after all these years, because that is what real love does. It endures, it believes, it stands firm when everything else falls away. And it leaves behind a legacy that touches hearts and changes lives long after the lovers themselves have gone. The story of Hannah and Asher is more than just a tale of the Old West. It is a testament to the enduring power of love, the importance of integrity, and the profound impact one person can have when they choose to believe in another. Their love story reminds us all that even in our darkest moments, when the whole world seems set against us, there may be someone out there ready to say those life-changing words, I believe you. And sometimes that is all it takes to change everything. One person, one moment of faith, one act of courage. From those simple things, a love can grow that will weather any storm, overcome any obstacle, and last not just a lifetime, but echo through generations. That was the gift Hannah and Asher gave to each other and to all of us who hear their story. The gift of believing, of trusting, of loving without reservation. The gift of standing together against the world. The gift of a love that was and forever will be true.